I still remember the exact words he said, and the way his lips twisted when he said them. "You're done here, Mark. Pack your things and get out." Just like that, 20 years of my life thrown in the trash, like I was nothing. 20 years of loyalty, sweat, missed birthdays, anniversaries, and moments with my family, all sacrificed so his empire could shine. And in return, a cold stare across his oak desk and a letter already typed, signed, and waiting for me. I couldn't even breathe. My throat locked up, my palms turned cold, and my ears rang so loudly that I barely heard him continue. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Security will walk you out." Security. As if I were a thief. As if I hadn't built half of what he was standing on. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would explode, but I managed to steady my voice enough to ask, "Why now? Why after everything I've given you?" He just smirked. "Because I don't need you anymore." But what he didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that I held something, a secret buried deep enough that if revealed, it would not just bring his empire crashing down, it would put him in handcuffs, a secret I had carried quietly for 20 years. And as the guard stepped forward, one of them reaching for my arm, I felt something stir inside me that I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't fear. It was fire, because the man who just tried to bury me didn't realize he was already standing on a grave, his own. But before I tell you how I brought him to his knees, let me tell you who I am and why this story is as much about my family as it is about me. My name is Mark Sullivan. I was born and raised in Ohio. My father was a truck driver. My mother a nurse who worked double shifts most of her life. They were good, hard-working people who never had much, but they had each other, and they gave me something no money could buy: grit. I carried that grit with me through everything, even when life knocked me down more times than I can count. I married young, too young some might say. Her name was Emily. She had this laugh that filled a room, and these hazel eyes that could see right through me. We had 2 kids, Lucas and Emma. They were my world. And yet, for 2 decades, I missed too many of their milestones, birthdays, even school plays, because my boss, Richard Hale, always found a way to remind me that his company needed me more than my family did. Richard was a wolf dressed in a silk suit. He started with nothing, or at least that's the story he told investors. But I know better. I was there at the beginning. I saw where the first million came from. I saw the blood on the money lawn before it turned into the gleaming skyscraper with his name on it. And the moment I saw it, I made a choice that would change my life. I kept proof. At first, it wasn't about revenge. It was insurance. I knew men like Richard didn't stay loyal. I knew one day he'd show me the same mercy he showed anyone who crossed him, none at all. And when that day came, I needed to be ready. Still, over the years, I convinced myself I'd never use it. I was making good money. My family was taken care of, and all I wanted was to ride it out until retirement. I swallowed every insult, every late-night phone call, every moment Richard made me feel small, because I thought if I kept my head down, I'd be safe. But life has a cruel way of teaching you lessons when you least expect it. It all started 6 months before that day in his office, when Emily was diagnosed with cancer. The bills piled up fast, and I begged Richard for time off to take her to treatments. He gave me 1 week. One. Then he started calling me in at night, making me choose between her and my job. I remember holding her hand in the hospital bed, watching her smile at me through the pain, and thinking, I can't lose this job. Not now. Not with everything on the line. So I obeyed Richard like always. I left her side when she needed me most, because I thought my sacrifice was worth something. 3 months later, Emily was gone, and Richard didn't even bother showing up at the funeral. He just sent a card signed by his secretary, a generic Hallmark card. That was the moment the ground cracked beneath me, though I didn't realize then just how deep the fall would go. After Emily's death, I poured myself into work. It was all I had left. Lucas and Emma were grown, living their own lives, and I felt like a stranger in their world. Richard used that weakness like fuel. He gave me more responsibility, more pressure, more reasons to forget I had a family at all. And I took it, because without Emily, I didn't know who I was anymore. Until the day he fired me. I didn't know then that this was the start of something bigger than anything I had ever imagined. I didn't know that the secret I had carried for 20 years would become my weapon, or that using it would drag me into a world of betrayal, violence, and justice so twisted that even I wouldn't recognize myself in the mirror. But I knew one thing as those guards pulled me toward the door. Richard Hale had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and I was going to make sure he paid for it. What I didn't expect, though, was how quickly blood would be spilled, and not just his, because the first body dropped sooner than anyone thought. The first body wasn't his. It was someone much closer to me, someone who didn't deserve what happened. 2 nights after I was thrown out of Hale Enterprises like yesterday's trash, I was sitting alone in my living room with nothing but silence pressing against the walls. My suit, the same one I wore the day he fired me, was still hanging on the chair by the door. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. I just sat there with a whiskey glass in my hand and a storm in my chest. That's when the phone rang. It was Lucas, my son. His voice was shaky, and for a moment, I thought he was crying. "Dad, it's Emma. You need to come. Now." I don't remember the drive. My body moved, but my mind was somewhere else. Every possible nightmare ripping through my head. I pulled up to her apartment complex, red and blue lights flashing across the windows. My stomach sank when I saw the ambulance doors open. And then I saw her, my daughter, being lifted inside, her face pale, her arm hanging limp over the stretcher. I ran. The officers tried to hold me back, but I tore through them until I was at her side. "Emma, baby, I'm here." Her eyes fluttered, barely opening. "Dad." Her lips trembled, and she whispered something so faint I almost missed it. "Wasn't an accident." Then the doors slammed shut, and the ambulance sped away. I froze. Not an accident. That sentence cut through me like a blade, because Emma never lied. The next hours were chaos. Hospital corridors, doctors rushing, me gripping Lucas by the shoulders, demanding answers he didn't have. All he could tell me was that Emma's car had been run off the road. Witnesses said a black SUV had swerved into her lane, forced her into the guardrail, and kept driving. A hit and run, they called it. But I knew better. I knew exactly who had ordered it. Richard Hale. That man didn't just fire me. He wanted to erase me. And he was willing to use my children to do it. Standing in that hospital waiting room, my hands shaking, I felt something snap inside me. All those years of swallowing my pride, of ignoring his cruelty, of telling myself it was worth it, it all burned away. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was war. When the doctor finally came out, he said Emma was alive but in critical condition. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding. If she made it through the night, her chances would improve, but it was too early to tell. I sat by her bedside until morning, watching the machines keep her alive, listening to her weak breathing, and making a promise in my heart. Richard Hale would never hurt my family again, not while I was still breathing. But promises are one thing, action is another, and I had the means to act. You see, 20 years ago, when Hale was still clawing his way to power, there was a deal he made, a deal that wasn't just illegal but deadly. I was there. I saw it. And I didn't just see it, I recorded it. Every whispered conversation. Every exchange. Every dollar that was laundered through blood-stained hands. I kept copies. Safe. Hidden where even Richard didn't know to look. That was my secret. And if I used it, Richard wouldn't just lose his empire. He'd lose his freedom. But it wasn't so simple. That evidence tied me to him, too. If it came out, I wasn't just a witness. I was an accomplice. And the law doesn't care about loyalty or manipulation. It cares about facts. If I use what I had, I risk going to prison myself. Still, as I looked at Emma lying in that bed, her body broken because of a man who thought he could destroy me, I knew there was no choice. I was already halfway to hell. If it meant saving her, I'd dive the rest of the way in. The first step was simple. Let Richard think I was finished. I didn't show up at the office again. I didn't call. I didn't try to fight him directly. Instead, I went back to the storage unit I had rented under a false name years ago. My hands trembled as I unlocked the rusted door, dust swirling around me. And there it was, The old metal case with the files, the tapes, the photographs that could bury him. When I touched it, I felt like I was holding a loaded gun. I wasn't wrong. That night, I began to make calls. Old contacts, people who owed me favors, a lawyer who had always warned me I'd need him someday. Slowly, I built a circle. Quietly, carefully, because I knew Richard had ears everywhere. But no matter how careful I was, it still wasn't enough, because someone was watching me. I didn't notice the black sedan at first, parked across the street from my house. I didn't notice the man at the diner, who left when I did. But by the third day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Richard already suspected, and he wasn't going to wait for me to make a move. That's why, when I came home one evening, the door was already open. The house was dark. Too dark. I stepped inside, calling out for Lucas, praying he hadn't come over. My hand tightened around the baseball bat I kept by the door, every nerve in my body on fire. Then I heard it, a creak on the floorboards upstairs. Someone was in my house. And in that moment, standing there in the silence, I realized Richard hadn't just declared war. He'd already sent his soldiers. I tightened my grip on the bat, every muscle coiled. I was ready to fight, but I had no idea what or who I was about to face at the top of those stairs. The creak came again, slow and deliberate, like whoever was upstairs wanted me to know they were there. My heart pounded so hard I could hear in my ears. I lifted the bat and crept toward the staircase, each step heavier than the last. The air felt thick, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Halfway up, I stopped. A shadow moved across the landing. My grip tightened. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking with rage and fear. Silence. Then, from the darkness, a man stepped forward. Broad shoulders, black gloves, a mask covering his face. He wasn't here to talk. Before I could react, he lunged. The weight of his body slammed into me, driving me backward down the stairs. My back hit the floor with a sickening thud, the bat flying from my hand. For a second, the world spun, but instinct took over. I rolled just as his boot came down where my head had been. I scrambled, hands reaching blindly, and found the bat again. I swung hard. The crack echoed through the house as it connected with his ribs. He grunted but didn't go down. He came at me again, fists like hammers, each blow rattling my bones. I was losing. But then I remembered Emma, lying broken in that hospital bed, and a fury rose inside me like fire. I swung again, this time at his knee. He collapsed with a howl, and before he could recover, I brought the bat down on his head. The house fell silent. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the man sprawled on my floor. Blood trickled from his temple, pooling on the hardwood. My hands shook as I touched his neck. A faint pulse. He was alive. For a moment, I thought about calling the police. But then reality hit me like ice water. This man wasn't acting alone. Richard had sent him. And if the cops came, they'd ask questions I couldn't answer, without exposing the very secret I was trying to protect. So I did the unthinkable. I dragged him, this stranger, this hired weapon, into my garage. I tied him to a chair with extension cords, my breath ragged, my hands trembling. And when he finally stirred, groaning, I stood over him with a bat in my hands, my voice low and dangerous. "Who sent you?" He spat blood onto the floor, then smiled through broken teeth. "You already know." I pressed the bat against his throat, leaning in close. "Tell me his name." His eyes gleamed. "Richard Hale." Hearing it out loud made my stomach twist. My suspicion was now a fact. Richard wasn't just trying to erase me. He wanted me dead. But before I could push further, before I could ask who else was involved, headlights flashed across the garage window. My heart stopped. Another car had pulled into the driveway. I killed the lights, crouched low, and peeked through the crack in the door. It was Lucas, my son. Panic surged through me. He couldn't see this. Not the man tied to the chair, not the blood, not the side of me I was becoming. If Lucas knew what I was doing, he'd never look at me the same way again. I rushed out the front door before he'd come inside. He looked at me with concern written all over his face. "Dad, what's going on?" "Your door was wide open. Are you okay? My mouth opened, but no words came. How could I explain any of this? That the father he thought he knew had a criminal empire's worth of dirt locked in a metal case? That his sister's accident was an accident? That the man he'd trusted for years was trying to destroy us? Yeah, I lied, forcing a smile. I'm fine. Just left it open by mistake. He frowned, not convinced, but didn't push. I just came to check on you. With everything that happened to Emma, I thought maybe you shouldn't be alone. His words cut me deeper than any blade. My son was worried about me, and I was hiding a would-be killer in the garage. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. Thanks, son, but I'm okay. Go get some rest. I'll call you if I need anything. Reluctantly, he left. When I stepped back into the garage, the chair was empty. The cords lay shredded on the floor, and the man was gone. A cold dread crawled up my spine. He knew where I lived, who I was, maybe even who my family was. And now he was out there, limping away into night, ready to report back to Richard. That was when I realized something terrifying. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. I had to move fast. I gathered the files, the tapes, everything from the metal case, and stuffed them into a duffel bag. My hands trembled as I zipped it shut. If Richard wanted me dead, then hiding wouldn't save me. Waiting wouldn't save Emma. The only way out was through. I was going to expose him. But before I could take the first step, before I could decide who to trust, the phone rang again. I picked it up, my voice barely steady. Hello? A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years, cold and sharp, cut through the line. Mark, we need to talk. Tonight, before it's too late. It wasn't Richard. It was someone I thought was long dead. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The voice on the phone wasn't just familiar. It was impossible. My hand went clammy against the receiver, my throat dry. Who is this? I whispered, though deep down I already knew. The line crackled. Then came the reply, calm but edged with something darker. It's Daniel. I froze. Daniel Carter, my best friend, my brother in everything but blood. The man who had disappeared 20 years ago after one of Richard Hale's deals went bad. Everyone believed he was dead. I believed it too, until now. Where the hell have you been? I demanded, my voice breaking between anger and disbelief. Now on the phone, he said quickly, they're listening. Meet me at the docks. Pier 17. Midnight. Come alone. The line went dead before I could ask another question. I stood there, the phone still pressed against my ear, my thoughts spiraling. If Daniel was alive, that meant two things. Richard hadn't killed him, and Daniel knew things. Things even I didn't. Maybe he was the missing piece I needed to bring Richard down. Or maybe he was the bait in a trap. Either way, I had no choice. Midnight came fast. The city was quiet when I drove down to the docks, the water black under the moonlight. I parked far enough away to keep an escape open and walked the rest of the way, the duffel bag with my evidence slung over my shoulder. The pier was deserted, creaking under my boots. A shadow moved near the edge, and when he stepped into the light, my chest tightened. It was him, older, leaner, his hair streaked with gray. But it was Daniel, alive. Mark, he said, almost smiling, you haven't changed. 20 years, I shot back, my voice shaking. You let me think you were dead. He nodded slowly. It was safer that way. I wanted to punch him, to hug him, to demand answers all at once. Instead, I asked the one question burning a hole in my chest. Why now? Why come back? His expression hardened. Because Hale is cleaning house. You're not the first name on his list, Mark. And if you don't move soon, you won't be the last. The words chilled me. What do you mean? I pressed. He looked around, making sure we were alone. Then he leaned in, his voice low. Richard has a new partner. Dangerous. Ruthless. They built something bigger than the company. Something global. And anyone who knows their history, anyone who can tie them to the blood that built it, is being erased. One by one. A sick weight dropped in my stomach. Emma, I said, my voice breaking. Daniel's eyes flickered with sympathy. I heard. That was no accident. I clenched my fist so tight my nails dug into my palms. Then we end him. Tonight. But Daniel shook his head. You think it's that simple? Hale isn't just a man anymore, Mark. He's a machine. He's bought cops, judges, even senators. If you go at him head-on, you'll be crushed before you even get close. The only way is to cut off his legs before he sees you coming. I opened a duffel bag and showed him the files, the tapes, the photographs. His eyes widened. You kept it all, he whispered. I told you I wasn't stupid. I said. Daniel's face darkened. This is enough to burn him alive. But you're holding dynamite, Mark. One wrong move, and you'll go down with him. Before I could answer, a sound cut through the night. The crunch of tires on gravel. Headlights flooded the pier. Shit, Daniel hissed. They found us. Black SUVs rolled up, doors flying open. Men in suits, guns drawn. At least a dozen of them. I grabbed the duffel bag, my pulse exploding in my ears. Daniel yanked a pistol from his waistband and shoved it into my hand. You remember how to use one of these? I stared at it, my fingers trembling. I was hoping I'd never have to again. Too late for that, he growled. The first shot rang out, ricocheting off the pier. Daniel fired back, dropping one of them instantly. I ducked behind a stack of crates, clutching the pistol, my chest heaving. The night exploded with gunfire, the smell of salt and smoke choking the air. I peeked around a crate, my hands slick with sweat. One of the men charged, his weapon raised. My instincts took over. I pulled the trigger. The blast echoed and the man fell. My stomach lurched. I had just killed someone, but I didn't have time to think. Another wave came, bullets tearing through the wood around me. Daniel shouted, "Move!" We sprinted toward the water's edge, the duffel bag bouncing against my back, gunfire chasing us. Then I saw it, a body falling. Daniel. He staggered, a red bloom spreading across his shirt. Daniel. I screamed, catching him as he collapsed. His blood soaked into my hands, warm and sticky. He grabbed my collar, pulling me close, his voice weak but urgent. Don't let it die with me. Finish it, Mark. Finish him. Then his eyes went still. For the second time in my life, I lost him. Rage swallowed the fear in my chest. I turned, pistol raised, firing blindly into the night until the gun clicked empty. The men closed in, their shadows stretching longer with each step. And that's when the sirens wailed. Police cruisers flooded the pier, red and blue lights flashing. The gunmen scattered like rats, some diving into the SUVs, others vanishing into the dark. I stood there frozen, Daniel's body in my arms, the empty gun still in my hand. Then I heard it. Drop the weapon. Hands in the air. The police. But their eyes weren't on the fleeing gunmen. They were on me. And in that moment, I realized exactly what Richard had done. He hadn't just sent killers after me. He had framed me. And now, as the officers closed in, guns pointed at my chest, I knew my fight for survival wasn't just against Richard anymore. It was against the law itself. The red and blue lights painted the pier like a nightmare carnival. My ears still rang from gunfire, but the shouts of the officers cut through the haze, sharp and unforgiving. Drop the weapon. Now! I froze. Daniel's blood was all over me, his body still warm in my arms. The gun felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My mind screamed, I'm not the enemy. But all they saw was a man standing over a corpse with a weapon in hand. Slowly, I let the pistol clatter onto the wood. My hands went up, shaking. I didn't do this. I rasped, "You've got the wrong." "On your knees," one barked, his weapon aimed square at my chest. I lowered myself onto the planks, my knees slamming hard. In seconds, they were on me. Cold metal bit into my wrists as the cuffs snapped shut. One of them yanked me to my feet and shoved me toward a cruiser. I stumbled, trying to look back at Daniel. But all I saw was his body disappearing under the blur of lights. The ride to the station was a blur. My thoughts tore in every direction. Richard had planned this perfectly. The attackers vanished into the night, while I was left holding the smoking gun. It was his move against me, and it was brilliant. too brilliant. Inside the precinct, they threw me into an interrogation room. Bare walls, a single metal table, a mirror that I knew was one-way glass. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. My clothes were stiff with blood. My wrists ached from the cuffs. Finally, the door opened. A detective walked in, tall, thin, with a mustache that looked 2 decades out of date. He sat down, dropped a file on the table, and studied me like I was already guilty. "Mark Sullivan," he said slowly. "You want to explain what the hell happened at the docks tonight?" I leaned forward. "What happened? I was ambushed. Men with guns. At least a dozen of them. They killed my friend, and they would have killed me if the police hadn't shown up." He opened the file. Inside were photos, grainy black and white stills from security footage. All of them showed me, holding the gun, firing, kneeling beside Daniel. Not a single one showed the men in suits. Convenient. "So let me get this straight," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You're the lone survivor of a shootout involving a phantom army of gunmen no one else saw? And your only witness happens to be dead." "It's the truth," I snapped, slamming my cuffed hands on the table. "Check the pier. There be shell casings, tire tracks, something." But I knew better. Richard cleaned his messes. By the time the evidence team got there, it would look like a ghost town. The detective leaned back. "You're looking at a murder charge, Sullivan. 1st degree. And from where I'm sitting, it's open and shut." Panic twisted in my chest. I couldn't let this happen. If I went down for murder, Richard won. Emma would never get justice. Daniel's death would be for nothing. I lowered my voice, leaning in. "Detective, listen to me. This is what it looks like. The man behind this, he's bigger than you think. Richard Hale. He's the one you should be chasing, not me." His expression didn't change. He just scribbled something in his notes. "You're saying the billionaire who donates half his fortune to children's hospitals and shakes hands with the governor sent a hit squad after you?" "Yes." I shouted, the veins in my neck straining. "Because I know things. I have proof." The detective stopped writing. His eyes flicked up. "Proof?" I hesitated. The duffel bag, the tapes, the files. They were still in my car, hidden under the seat. If I told him, maybe I could turn this around. But then I saw it, a tiny twitch in his face. Not much, just enough, and it hit me like a brick. He already knew. The detective wasn't confused. He wasn't skeptical. He was on Richard's payroll. If I handed him that duffel bag, it would disappear forever. My only weapon would be gone. I leaned back, forcing my face blank. "Forget it. I was wrong. I don't have anything." His mouth curled into a thin smile like he'd just won. That's what I thought. They processed me like an animal. Fingerprints, mugshots, the works. Then they shoved me into a holding cell. Cold concrete pressing against my back as the bars clanged shut. For the first time, the weight of it crushed me. I was trapped. Emma was fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Lucas didn't even know I was here. Daniel was gone, for real this time. And Richard? He was probably sitting in his penthouse, sipping whiskey, already celebrating the end of Mark Sullivan. But Richard underestimated me. I still had the duffel bag. And I wasn't done yet. Hours bled into days. My court hearing came fast, the judge refusing bail because I was a flight risk. They were moving me toward trial like it was already decided. The newspapers splashed my face across the front page. Corporate executive arrested in dockside murder. But then, on the 3rd night in that cell, something happened I didn't expect. A guard slipped me a folded note with my dinner tray. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just walked away. My pulse jumped as I unfolded it under the dim light. 7 words, scrawled in hurried handwriting. "If you want to live, trust me." No signature. No explanation. I read it over and over, my hands shaking. Someone on the inside wanted to help me. But who? And why now? Before I could make sense of it, the lights in the cell block flickered, then went out completely. And in the darkness, I heard the sound of footsteps. Steady, getting closer. Then the lock on my cell clicked. The door swung open. and a shadowed figure stepped inside. The cell door creaked open, and for a heartbeat, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The figure stepped inside, cloaked in the dark, moving with purpose. My instincts screamed trap, but something about the way they moved, silent, deliberate, told me this wasn't an ordinary guard. Then the whisper came, low and urgent. "Get up, Mark. We don't have time." The voice was female, sharp, confident, not someone I recognized. I hesitated, my muscles tensed, ready to fight or run. "Who the hell are you?" "No questions," she snapped, tossing something onto the bunk. "A black hoodie. Put that on. If we don't move now, you'll never walk out of here alive." My heart thudded. This could be another of Richard's games, a setup to finish me off quietly. But the note in my pocket said, "Trust me." And right now I didn't have a choice. I pulled on the hoodie. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and guided me out into the corridor. The emergency lights flickered faint red, casting everything in shadows. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to wail. We slipped past cells where other inmates stirred, shouting questions, pounding on bars. But no guards came. The whole block felt abandoned. "What did you do?" I hissed. "Created a distraction," she replied flatly. "Fire in the east wing. Sprinklers on every floor. They'll be busy for the next 10 minutes. We reached the service door. She swiped a stolen key card, and it clicked open. Cold night air hit my face, sharp and freeing. For a second, I almost collapsed from the weight lifting off me. But we weren't safe yet. A black van waited in the alley, engine running. She shoved me inside, then climbed in after me. The driver hit the gas before the door even shut. Tires screeched as we tore through back streets, sirens fading behind us. My pulse hammered as I stared at her in the dim glow of the van's interior. She pulled back her hood, and for the first time I saw her face. Dark hair, piercing green eyes. No nonsense. "My name's Claire," she said, "and if you want a chance at taking Hale down, you'll listen carefully." I narrowed my eyes. "Who sent you?" She held my gaze. "Daniel." The words hit me like a hammer. "Daniel's dead." Claire shook her head. "I was his insurance policy. Before he went to meet you at the pier, he left me instructions. Said if anything happened, I was to get you out." She leaned closer, her voice lowering. "And he left me something else. Something Hale doesn't know exists." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, weathered notebook. The sight of it made my chest tighten. "This is Daniel's ledger," she explained. "Names, dates, transactions, the real record of Hale's rise. He trusted only me with it." I reached for it, but she pulled it back. "Not yet. First, I need to know I can trust you. Daniel said you had something too. Proof." The duffel bag. My evidence. It was still hidden in my car, parked blocks away from the precinct. If Richard's men hadn't found it yet, it was the last card I had. I nodded slowly. "I have it. Enough to put him away for life." Her eyes hardened. "Then we combine what you have with this. Together, it's not just evidence. It's a death sentence for Richard Hale." The van swerved sharply, pulling into an underground garage. The driver killed the lights, parking deep in the shadows. Claire turned to me, her face deadly serious. "Listen, Mark. Hale knows you're out now. That means he'll burn the world to find you. He'll come after your kids, your friends, anyone he can use to break you. If you want to end this, there's no going back. You understand?" I thought of Emma, broken in that hospital bed. Lucas, worried sick, not knowing the storm his father was dragging him into. Daniel, lying dead on that pier. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. "I understand," I said, my voice like steel. "Good," Claire replied. She handed me a burner phone. "You'll hear from me when it's time. Until then, disappear. Stay quiet. And Mark, don't trust anyone." Before I could answer, the driver opened the van door. "We're here." I stepped out into the shadows of the garage, the cold night wrapping around me like a warning. Claire and the driver vanished back into the dark, leaving me alone. For the first time in days, I was free, But freedom felt heavier than the cell I just left, because now it wasn't just survival on the line. It was war, and the next move would draw blood one way or another. I didn't know then just how much blood, because by morning, Richard Hale's first victim would make headlines, and it wouldn't be a stranger. It would be someone I loved. The news broke at dawn. I sat hunched in a dingy motel room, staring at the flickering TV, the duffel bag of evidence at my feet. The headline carved itself into my chest like a blade. Local man found dead outside home. Victim identified as Lucas Sullivan. My son, my boy, gone. I dropped to my knees. The air ripped out of me. Rage, grief, and guilt crashed like a tidal wave until all I could do was scream into stale motel air, my fists slamming the floor until blood ran from my knuckles. Hale hadn't just hurt me. He had taken everything. Emma's life stolen in slow agony. Daniel, now Lucas. Richard Hale had declared himself God over my family's fate, and I was done kneeling. I called Claire. My voice was gravel, steady with the kind of calm that only comes when a man has nothing left to lose. It ends tonight. She didn't argue. She only said, then we make sure he burns. We struck after midnight. Hale's mansion sat on the hill, lit like a fortress, armed guards patrolling with rifles. It didn't matter. I wasn't sneaking in. I was tearing the gates down. We came in with fire. Literally. Claire rigged the fuel drums in the back of her van with makeshift charges. The gates exploded in a storm of flame. Steel twisting, men screaming as the inferno swallowed the front yard. I stormed through the smoke, pistol raised, my heart dead, my soul ablaze. The guards fired. I fired back. The first one's chest exploded in a mist, his body folding backward. Another drop was shot to the throat, gurgling as he clawed at the blood spilling between his fingers. They weren't men anymore. They were shadows between me and the monster I had come for. I moved like a storm, bullets tearing the night, my fury blinding the pain. One charged me from the side. I swung the butt of my gun across his face, shattering bone, then drove the barrel into his mouth and pulled the trigger. His skull painted the marble walls crimson. Claire covered me, precise and merciless, her silent shots dropping anyone who tried to flank us. We cut a path through fire and blood, bodies falling in our wake. At the top of the stairs, he was waiting, Richard Hale. No guards now, just him, in his silk suit, a glass of whiskey in hand like nothing had happened. "Mark," he said calmly, smirking. "I wondered how long it would take before you came crawling back." I raised the gun, my hand steady. "You killed my son." He sipped his drink, unfazed. "Collateral. You knew the risks when you kept your little stash of secrets. You think you're the first man who's tried to stand against me? You're nothing, Mark. Nothing without me." That word, nothing, set fire to every vein in my body. I lunged, slamming him against the wall, the glass shattering in his hand. My pistol jammed under his chin. 20 years. I growled through clenched teeth. I bled for you. I buried my marriage for you. I watched my wife die, and you didn't even care enough to send more than a goddamn Hallmark card. And now my kids. My voice cracked, rage and grief tearing me apart. You took my kids. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "You don't have the guts," he whispered. I smiled, a cold, broken smile. "I don't need guts. I've got nothing left to lose." But shooting him wasn't enough. Not for Emily. Not for Emma. Not for Lucas. Not for every scar this man carved into my soul. I dropped the gun, and I used my hands. I slammed him onto his own desk, my fists raining down, each blow cracking skin, breaking teeth. He screamed, begged, choked on his own blood. I didn't stop. Not when his nose flattened, not when his jaw snapped. I wanted him to feel every second of the pain he'd ever inflicted. He tried to crawl away. I grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face against the oak until it split, his blood seeping into the grain. Finally, I pulled the lighter from my pocket, Emily's old lighter. She used it for candles when the power went out. I flicked it, the tiny flame trembling in my bloodied hand. "This is for them," I whispered. I doused him in his own whiskey, poured it across the ruined desk, and lit the flame. Fire roared to life, swallowing paper's curtains, spreading like judgment itself. Richard Hale screamed as the flames consumed him, his empire burning with him. I watched, my face blank, as his body thrashed, black smoke curling to the ceiling. The smell of charred flesh filled the air, but I didn't flinch. I stood there until his screams died, until there was nothing left but fire. Claire dragged me out before the mansion collapsed, the inferno lighting the night sky. From the outside, it looked like hell had opened its gates and claimed its king. We stood on the hill, breathless, watching the empire of Richard Hale crumble into ash. It was over. He was gone. But as the flames devoured everything I had fought to destroy, I felt no peace, only emptiness. Because revenge doesn't bring back the dead. It just leaves you with blood on your hands and a fire in your chest that never goes out. Still, as the night wind carried the scent of smoke and ruin, I whispered into the darkness, "Emily, Emma, Lucas, Daniel, it's done." And for the first time, I let myself collapse, my body breaking under the weight of survival. Richard Hale was finished, but so was I,